Tervetuloa Tyrnävä Showhun. Kansallissosialistien kirjojen polttaminen 1933. Tämä on kiinnostava ja tietysti arka aihe myös. Ja tämä video, semmoinen reilu 10 minuuttia, niin tämä tulee taas Zoomer-historian, eli tämä kaveri on britti. Ja hän mielestäni lähestyy tätä aihetta silleen hienovaraisesti, ja hän vaan katsoo siinä, että hän tuo niitä esiin, että mitä saksalaiset silloin 1933 polttivat, mitä kirjoja ne oli, ja sitten vähän tuossa tulee sitä taustaakin. Ja mä käsittelen sitä aihetta sitten tämän dokkarin jälkeen. Ja tässä on automaattikäännöksellä tehdyt suomenkieliset käännökset. Tämä on myös oikein kiinnostavaa katsottavaa.
The book burnings in Germany in the 1930s are widely mentioned in the media, in school, and in books. Whenever National Socialism is brought up, the book burnings are named as one of the main evils that were committed during that period. The book burnings have become a byword for state censorship in general. My main question regarding the way this event is presented is simply this. Are book burnings inherently bad? Why is it put on such a pedestal? The official Holocaust Museum's own video on the topic starts off like this.
To burn books is simply a fundamental repression of ideas.
I mean, what can a book do? And why is it so dangerous that it needs to be physically annihilated?
If book burning or censorship is so unheard of and egregious, why did we ban 30,000 books in post-war Germany during denazification when the Nazis themselves only banned around 4,000? The event itself is constantly mentioned, but it's also always glossed over extremely quickly. Few stop to ask themselves, what books did the Nazis actually burn? This fairly simple question is rarely looked into. When asked, the answer is usually just Jewish books and they didn't like Jews, and then no further comment given. This is not good enough. It's time to actually look into what these books were and why they were burned and then banned. This is a very sensitive topic for reasons that I'm sure you can figure out, so I'll present the books and their contents without opinion. Also, my Patreon is down below if you enjoy these videos and wish to help me on my way to being able to make these videos full time. Anything helps. My Telegram is also down below. To discuss the book burnings, a brief summary of the cultural change during the Weimar Republic is needed, as a large part of the rise of the Nazis was a reaction, or you could even say revolution, against these cultural changes. Again, I will not comment if these changes are inherently good or bad. If you're Christian or vaguely conservative, this period is seen as disgusting. To gay people, it's seen as the biggest step forward in their struggle to be equal. After the collapse in World War I, Germany was in a terrible state. Communist revolutions rose and fell, nationalist militias rose to meet them. Stuck with heavy loan repayments to the Allies, the German currency was not in a good shape, and things would only get worse in that regard later on. Life had begun anew, the old regime was gone, millions had died or been disabled fighting for a Germany that no longer existed. There was no triumphant return for them. A sad, depressed, and nihilistic world arose from the rubble. Berlin was the epicenter of this new world. The old values were gone, and the new were in. The crippling poverty had turned many to work in the streets. There were as many as 100,000 prostitutes or sex clubs at any one time, just in that one city. It wasn't confined to a red light district like modern-day Amsterdam, for example. This was the city. The most unusual culture arose in what some would call a modern-day Babylon. There was a street in Berlin purely filled with pregnant prostitutes, another with disfigured ones, acid scars, hunchbacks, you name it. Another was purely mother-daughter teams who would dress exactly alike. A lot of what went on in the city, many in the modern world would agree with. This aspect, most would find abhorrent. On a more acceptable level to our modern society, homosexuality was rife, and one famous Brit who emigrated called Berlin a bugger's paradise. Thousands turned up from all over Europe to the one city they felt their life would be accepted and even promoted. Drugs were widely available, mainly morphine, opium, and cocaine. Transgenderism saw the light of day. Magnus Hirschfeld, a homosexual scientist, founded his Institute of Sexual Research. Here, all moral laws of the past were out the window, and people were free to experiment with gender, bizarre sexual fetishes, or browse his collection of sex items he had on display at the Institute. He was known as the Einstein of sex, and the first occurrence of someone undergoing a full male-to-female gender reassignment surgery was done here. Berlin was essentially liberalism run wild. An important aspect to note is that many, or even most of the leading figures of this new liberal culture, and the liberal government at large at this time, were Jewish. I say this without opinion or further comment. Many Jews talk openly and proudly of this period, and if you're a liberal and some aspects of this time is part of your worldview that you strive for, this is your prerogative. Whether this type of society is right or wrong depends on your worldview. The National Socialists, however, found it abhorrent. As a result, Many of the books on the banned list were indeed by Jewish authors. This is just a brief overview of the culture at the time. I'll eventually write a video of its own regarding the Weimar period and its part in the rise of the Nazi Party. Hopefully it gives you somewhat of an idea of the time they were living in, as it actually isn't covered very much. Only in the past few years has attention come its way on the internet.
K-ruokaverkkokauppa. Sitä saa enemmän kuin mitä tilaa.
Kun närästys polttelee rintalastan alla. Sammuta se
The burnings started spontaneously by the German Student Union. They called for a cleansing by fire of books that went against the German spirit, which they felt were leading people astray. The Union published the 12 Theses, a reference to Martin Luther's 95 Theses and written in a similar style. It went as follows. I've replaced all the uses of the word Volk with people instead of folk, which sounds stupid in English. 1. Language and literature have their roots in the people. It is the German people's responsibility to assure that its language and literature are the pure and unadulterated expressions of its people's tradition. 2. At present, there is a chasm between literature and German tradition. This situation is a disgrace. 3. Purity of language and literature is your responsibility. Your people have entrusted you with the duty of faithfully preserving your language. 4. Our most dangerous enemy is the Jew and those who are his slaves. 5. A Jew can only think Jewish. If he writes in German, he is lying. The German who writes in German but thinks un-German is a traitor. The student who speaks and writes un-German is, in addition, faultless and has abandoned his duties. 6. We want to eradicate lies. We want to denounce treason. We want institutions of discipline and political education for us, the students, not mindlessness. 7. We want to regard the Jew as alien, and we want to respect the traditions of the people. Therefore, we demand of the censor, Jewish writings are to be published in Hebrew. If they appear in German, they must be identified as translations. Strongest actions against the abuse of the German script. German script is only available to Germans. The un-German spirit is to be eradicated from public libraries. 8. We demand of the German students the desire and capacity for independent knowledge and decisions. 9. We demand of German students the desire and capability to maintain the purity of the German language. 10. We demand of German students the desire and capability to overcome Jewish intellectualism and the resulting liberal decay in the German spirit. 11. We demand the selection of students and professors in accordance with their reliability and commitment to the German spirit. 12. We demand that German universities be a stronghold of the German people's tradition and a battleground reflecting the power of the German mind. Nearly a month later, the book burnings began at the epicenter of Weimar culture, Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute of Sex Research. 20,000 books were burned. These types of spontaneous book burnings continued until it became a whole movement of its own. The motives, in their eyes, are summed up well by Goebbels in 2 passages from his speech relating to the burnings. Yes to decency and morality in family and state. Here, the intellectual foundation of the November Republic is sinking to the ground, but from this wreckage, the phoenix of a new spirit will triumphantly rise. As the ever-growing Nazi movement saw it, the years following the disaster of the World War had been a mistake. Germany had gone down the wrong path. They felt their culture had been hijacked by Jews, liberals, and defeatists. They felt family values had given way to rampant individualism, moral values given way to sexual deviancy, homosexuality, and worse. The comparisons to our current time are obvious and barely deserve mentioning. Then, as now, it was a battle between the sacred principles of our society in the past and the new, liberal, and unknown. Now I will simply, again, hello YouTube, without opinion, go over the genres and some specifics of the books they sent to the flames. Communism was the sworn enemy of National Socialism. They had fought and died against each other ever since the birth of the movement. There was never any doubt that communist works would be the first on the chopping block. To name some of the most obvious, Karl Marx's Das Kapital, the Holy Book of Communism, was sent to the flames, as was Lenin's and Trotsky's works. Communists closer to home, like Rosa Luxemburg's works, were banned also. Pacifism was seen as weakness. While National Socialism didn't see war as inherently good, the movement felt pacifism to be like a disease that weakens the wider whole. The book that spawned the recent Netflix hit remake, All Quiet on the Western Front, was sent to the flames and later banned. While this might seem extreme, consider that a few years later, Oswald Mosley, Great Britain's biggest peace advocate, would be thrown in a tiny cold cell without trial for opposing the Second World War and only released when he was seriously ill. Books on early transgender theory being sent to the flames should hardly be surprising given where the first burning began. Hirschfeld's library was gutted and sent straight into the flames outside. Transgenderism was viewed in all countries, not just in National Socialist Germany at the time, as something absurd and deranged. Hirschfeld was the perfect example for the Germans of what they didn't want in society. A Jewish homosexual scientist who turns men into women. He was on a speaking tour at the time of the burnings. He never returned. Some of his works include the objective diagnosis of homosexuality, transvestites, the erotic drive to cross-dress, and the sexual history of the World War. Equally alongside with transgenderism, the burning of homosexual works could be best summed up in the character of Hirschfeld and his works. The liberalization of society and the availability for those fighting their homosexual desires, no matter how strong, to act on them was everywhere, even in the early Nazi party. The top rungs of the SA had a serious problem with bedding young boys. Part of the justification for the Night of the Long Knives was this. When the SS stormed in to arrest the top SA members, many were found in bed with young boys. They wanted this utterly stamped out of the party and society as a whole, and the acceptance of it left to the Weimar past. The laws that were currently in place against homosexuality from the previous regimes but not enforced were now actually enforced under the Nazis. Pornography or any kind of work seen as being degenerate in this regard was sent to the flames and banned. Much as today, there was a huge opposition to porn, and why the Nazis would oppose such a thing needs no explanation. I haven't left the Jewish books for last because I feel they're the least important. It's more because it's a culmination of the rest. The Jews, for many long and complex historical reasons, find themselves massively overrepresented in art, literature, politics, and liberal culture in general. They've been a major part of the history of liberalism, and at the spearhead of every movement that's challenged the European status quo. I say this without opinion. Maybe this is something to be proud of, maybe it isn't, but it is the case for whatever reason. Your interpretation of this phenomena depends on your worldview. All that is to say that at the highest levels of all the former categories, you find many, many Jewish authors, and mixed in with the other gripes the National Socialists had with Jewish practices, such as their banking, it's not hard to imagine why the Jewish books were an easy target for them. They felt the Jews had a hand in all their problems, be it cultural, political, or financial. Again, I state all of this without opinion of my own. To say book burning and banning is inherently wrong would be both silly and hypocritical of any Westerner. The majority of our nations have books on the banned list. If there isn't a banned list, buying certain books will get you on a watch list. We censor our media, we censor what types of books are able to get published. Inversely to the topic of this video, can you imagine if a pro-Nazi history book tried getting published? They'd be thwarted at every step. David Irving's life was destroyed by his interpretation of events in World War II, and finding his books is not impossible, but very expensive. Many works may be allowed at the government level, but good luck getting through the Amazon book bans and finding a publishing house. Anyway, this is but a short video detailing what types of books were actually banned. The event is widely mentioned, but not discussed. I think it's important people know what books were actually banned before rushing to claim that it was some unspeakable evil, whatever side of the fence they may sit on politically. There has been very, very few censorship-free civilizations in history, and National Socialism was no different. Historical context is important. Who knows, if the internet and its censorship didn't exist now, would right-wing books not be getting burnt at this very moment?
Jep, noin. Se oli kiinnostavaa jaksoa. Tuolle Zoomer-historianalle annan kyllä pisteet, että hän ei jaksoa tehnyt minkään ideologian valossa, vaan hän on halunnut kertoa, että mitä siellä silloin tapahtui ja mitä kirjoja palo, ja toi niitä asioita siihen esiin ilman mitään varsinaista ideologiaa. Ja ensimmäisen maailmansodan jälkeen oli se Versaillesin häpeä rauhansopimus niin kuin Saksan näkökulmasta, ja se 1920-luvun Saksa vaipui juuri tuommoiseen, mistä tuossa puhutaan. Ja sitten talous ja kaikki lähti rulettaa, kun kansallissosialistit 30-luvun alussa tulivat valtaan. Ja valitettavasti se sitten johti toiseen maailmansotaan. Ja myös Venäjällä niin Neuvostoliiton, kun Ukrainan, Valko-Venäjän ja Venäjän presidentit päätti lopettaa Neuvostoliiton, niin sitten Venäjä myös vaipuu tuommoiseen samanlaiseen tilaan 1990-luvulla. Ja se on ollut kyllä kaamea paikka, oli silloin, olen käynyt katsoa tämä näin, 92 ja 95 ja 96 niihin aikoihin, niin oli kyllä synkkää meno siellä. Ja ilmeisesti Venäjällä sitten 1998 se suunta lähti niin kuin menee ylöspäin, ja sitten Putinin tultua valtaan, niin sitä on mennyt valtavassa vauhdissa ihmisten elämä parantunut, ja siellä on meno aivan erilaista kuin silloin 90-luvulla. Ja tavallaan niin erilaista sensuuriahan on ollut aina kirjallisuudessa, ja tässä on mun kirja Taikuuden oppikirja, Liiketaikuus, Motion Magic, tämä on Liken vuodelta 2004. Ja tämä on ensimmäinen tämmöinen pedagoginen taikuuden opetuskirja, mitä Suomessa on tehty. Ja täälläkin oli niin tuossa taidepuolella semmoinen niin sanottu sanaton sensuuri, että tämä ei ole niin oikeata taidetta. Muistan tuon ajan oikein hyvin, niin se oli iso avaus, kun sain tuon kirjan julkaistua. Ja tällä hetkellä tämä sensuuri on selkeä taide- ja kulttuuripuolella ja valtamediassa. Että tietyn tyyppisiä ei enää saa niin kuin tehdä. Olette huomannut, että Agatha Christien huippuklassikkokirjoista, niin johon nimet vaihtuu. Peppi Pitkätossu joutui jo sensuurialaisuuteen. Eikö niitä Tatu ja Patu-kirjojakin, lastenkirjoja pistetty uusiksi? Ja mitä kaikkea tällä hetkellä niin kuin tapahtuu. Kun Kansallisteatterissa esitetään, mainostetaan Shakespearen Romeo ja Julia, niin se onkin sitten Julia ja Romeo. Ja pistää asiat vähän uuteen kuntoon. Niin tämä on ikävä tilanne tällä hetkellä kyllä läntisessä kulttuurissa. Ja mä olin yhdessä tuommoisessa avoimen yliopiston ja taideyliopistojen tuommoisessa teatterijohtajakoulutuksessa, missä oli luentoa pitämässä EU-rahoituksen edustaja, mä en muista tuliko jostain Kroatiasta vai mistä nainen, niin sitten se oli se, että mennäkseen niihin EU-kulttuurirahoituksiin, niin sulla pitää vaihtaa sun missio, mitä sä teet, ja otat yhden näistä, eli refugees, welcome, climate change ja sitten tämä transseksuaalisuus. Niin sitten kun otat sen missioksi, niin sitten on yksi mahdollisuus, että voit saada pätäkkää. Niin, näin se menee tällä hetkellä. Siellä on isot portinvartijat, jotka pitää niitä kiinni ja katsoo, mitä koulussa opetetaan. Ja senhän takia monet toimijat, niin kuin minäkin, niin olen alkanut siirtyä paljon tänne YouTubeen ja muihin näihin vaihtoehtomedioihin, tai alkaa itse pyörittää mediaa, koska se on tavallaan the only way näinä päivinä. No niin, mutta tämmöinen täältä Tyrnävä Shown Datsalta.